Hello, it's Ryan from 2MinuteTennis.net, and in this video, I'm going to show you what you can learn from my forehand technique to help improve your forehand. Now, first, you want to learn the concept of checkpoints. Checkpoints are places in the swing you can film yourself and scroll through and stop at a certain moment, and you know what to look for at that checkpoint. So there are 6 checkpoints in the Topspin Forehand, and they are the ready position, the unit turn, the drop, contact, extension, and the finish. And so you want to look at video of your own forehand, and you want to look for certain things at each checkpoint. The first is the ready position. Actually be ready in your ready position. You'll notice my elbows are out on the left here. Look at my elbows out away from my body. The tip of the racket is up. You want your elbows out, tip up, and you'll notice the distance between my racket and my body. You don't want the racket super close to your body. You don't want the racket, tilted off to one side. I know we can't see my racket, but my racket's like this right now. I don't want your racket hanging over to the left. I watch a lot of recreational players every day where I coach, and the racket's just hanging down on the left, and they have no idea actually what they look like at that moment, and that they're truly not ready in their ready position. It might be a starting position for them or a waiting position, but it's not a ready position. And then you got to make sure that you are split stepping. So you want to do a little hop as your opponent is hitting the ball. If your feet split apart and move away from each other a little bit, that's also a good thing. And not only is it a braking mechanism that helps you to change direction, but it also then allows you to explode in the direction you need to move to hit the ball. So look ready in your ready position. Film yourself and just see what you look like prior to even hitting the ball, waiting for your opponent to hit. I'm telling you, having a better ready position is going to make for a better forehand. Now, when you take your racket back, you want to take it back with both hands. Now, I talked about having the elbows out. You'll notice the space under my back elbow. And in fact, from the back view, we can actually see my armpit. When I asked you to have your elbows out in the ready position, and I do Zoom lessons for people all the time, every week, multiple times a week, people send me videos, and then we meet live on Zoom, and I critique and analyze their technique right in front of them and answer all their questions about how they can improve, their forehand, backhand serve, their strategy, even in footwork. But one of the things I look for in their ready position is this space right here. You should have some space. Now, the camera view, you can see the space on this side as well, but the camera, the way I am situated to the camera, you can't see it. But I actually look for that space. See, when you have your elbows out and then you turn, it's easy then to have your elbow out in the unit turn. The reason we want the elbow out and have the space, it's called air the armpit really under here, is where you get space under your armpit. When you have that, it actually helps keep the racket more on the hitting side of the body. Players often have a very large backswing on their forehand. And one of the things that can help you return a fast serve, handle a deep ball, a fast ball, a ball with a lot of spin, or a combination of those, is to actually shorten the swing a little bit and keep the racket more on the hitting side of the body. So let's take this line, right? You don't want really to allow your racket to go back here if you can help it. If you can keep the racket more on the hitting side of your body, your chest side, rather than your back side, then that can, and I know that some pros, they go way back here, I get it, but if you can keep your racket more on the hitting side of the body, that is really going to help you as an amateur player deal with the pace and the depth and even the spin that a lot of your opponents can hit. And by keeping your elbow up, this elbow right here, it actually helps this to occur. It helps keep the racket on the hitting side of the body as the racket drops, and you can see that. So don't allow your elbow to drop here. You can see that my back elbow and my hand are at a similar height. So when you turn, have your back elbow and your hand at a similar height. And you can even see that my shoulder is at that same height as well. So my hand, my elbow, my shoulder are all at the same height. You'll notice that my left hand is on the throat of the racket, or has gone with, back with the throat. This really facilitates a coil, taking the racket back and coiling the body, turning the shoulders more than the hips, and then uncoiling. So that's a really great way to make sure that you are turning enough on your forehand. A lot of players struggle hitting down the line or inside out because they don't turn their body enough. And then they end up just pulling the ball cross court because their left hand, or I'll say the non-hitting hand, did not go back with them. So when you take your racket back, take it back with both hands. You can see the racket head is slightly higher than my head. That means my racket has gone slightly up as I've taken it back. Take the racket up. Have your back armpit exposed to the camera. You can see my knees are bending and I'm preparing to drop the racket down below contact. This is a really important position to get into. Take your racket back with both hands. Have your back elbow up. Have the left hand still on the throat of the racket. Again, that's if you're right-handed. You'll even notice that my chin and shoulder are touching. All right, now let's go to the drop. The drop is when you're going to drop your body. You're going to help that occur by bending your knees. You can see my knees are bending, and I'm going to begin dropping my racket down. Now, when I drop the racket down, I want to have the racket face closed. And it doesn't matter if you use more of a pre-stretch forehand, the way Agassi and Sampras would have, or even the extreme lag forehand, the way Federer and Nadal use, or if you use more of a Del Potro drop of the racket, or Diego Schwartzman, where there's very little lag at all. You want the racket face closed at this point. You can see I have a very moderate amount of pre-stretch. My racket falls on the outside of my hand, and then watch my hand goes forward, and my racket does a little flip there. So that's just my hand going forward and the racket going back. I was never taught that as a student, but I just naturally developed that as I got older, kind of into my late teens, early 20s, even mid-20s. I really started to just morph into that naturally. Again, I was never taught that move, but I was athletic enough, I guess I'll say it that way, that my body kind of naturally started to do that, maybe to be able to handle pace and also be able to hit with pace in that situation. But the key points here is that the racket does not go way back here, but that the racket stays more on the hitting side, but it closes and tilts down. The reason you want your racket tilted down is because you want your strings at contact to be facing forward. Now, you can get away with your racket being closed a few degrees at this point, especially if you have a lot of racket speed, and then you can kind of drag that ball up over the net. But the key to consistency is this right here. You want your strings facing forward at contact. So that means you have to have your racket face closed prior to contact. Again, I know not every pro, and I've said this in so many videos, I know not every pro on TV closes their racket face on every forehand. I get that. But as a recreational player, if you're clicking on this video because you're trying to improve your forehand, then tilting the strings down on purpose prior to contact is going to make a world of difference in your consistency. Now, not only do we have to talk about the racket, we got to talk about the body. You'll notice my body is coming up to contact. So if I just draw a line at the top of my head, look how I'm coming up to contact. So a lot of players say, like, stay down and don't come up. Look at the pros. The pros go up. I've made so many videos on this. The pros come up as they're hitting the ball and unwind. Are there situations where they keep their knees bent when they're in a little trouble or handling a deep ball on the rise and they're kind of leaning back? Of course, they're not using their legs as much. But if everything is going well for you and you're on balance and you can load up to hit this shot, we want the body to unwind in the shot. So we don't just want to come up, but we're also unwinding. And when we do that, we are lifting up with our body and pressing down with our legs to really make that happen. I also want you to notice my left hand. My left hand, as I'm hitting, and you can see my hips turning, you can see my hips uncoiling. Look at my left hand. This is so important. My left hand's going up like this. The left hand should rise as you're hitting the ball. Most recreational players I see who cannot turn their hips, and there are a lot of players who do not turn their hips into the ball, it's because their non-hitting hand drops as they're hitting. Look at Dominic Thiem hit a forehand. Look at Victoria Azarenka hit a forehand. They are perfect examples of the non-hitting hand rising. You want the non-hitting hand rising as you're striking the ball. And not only do you want it rising, but you want to make sure that it is above contact. You can see from the back view here, my left hand, my non-hitting hand at contact is visible over my left shoulder. You'll see Victoria Azarenka is doing the same thing. You'll even see Tommy Haas. His left hand is visible over his left shoulder at contact. When your left hand unwinds, you can see my left hand is on the right side of my body, and then it's going to move over to my left side, right? That's just me uncoiling into the shot. When it rises, it facilitates hip turn. It makes hip turn so much easier. We have to turn our hips. Look at my hips turning. We want to turn our hips as we're hitting the ball. That helps bring the racket up and through contact. But if the left hand, if the non-hitting hand drops, it can become a counterweight. Then the left hand goes this way, the racket goes this way, and you'll actually see people hug themselves like they're in a straitjacket, and they cannot turn their hips. So at contact, stop the racket, stop the video when you film yourself at contact. And when you film yourself at contact from the back and from the side, you want your strings facing forward, but you can see my chin and shoulder are getting really close because my head is, I'm looking down at contact. But you want to make sure that your non-hitting hand is higher than contact and rising, but you also, from the back view, want to make sure that it's visible over your left shoulder. Again, that's to make sure that you are turning your hips. After contact, the swing's got to go up. A lot of players at this point, they start swinging down and around when you want to go up. In fact, my racket goes out of the screen. The tip of the racket goes up and out of the screen. You want to be going up. Tennis is a lifting game. We want to send this ball up over the net. So you got to learn to go up. Look at Nadal finish with his hand above his head, his hitting hand, in that buggy whip type of forehand all the time. That's because he's swinging up. He's lifting up. He hits the ball higher over the net than any other pro. So if you were playing tennis in a basement with a low ceiling and you're practicing forehands, you should be hitting the basement ceiling with your racket. And that, you can see my back foot is turning up on the toe. Again, that's kind of like that golfer's look where your hips are turning. That's only going to be used when you're really using a neutral stance, by the way, where that back foot turns up on the toe. And then the finish. The finish is where you're going to catch the racket with the non-hitting hand. And I want to say here, I'm not adding the left hand to the racket. I'm adding the racket to the left hand. My left hand is already up. I see a lot of players, they'll finish up here as high as I am, but their non-hitting hand is down here because they were dropping it down, which means their hips couldn't turn. And then you'll see their left hand go, whoops, I need to add on to the racket. That's not what you want. You want that left hand up, and then you add the racket to the left hand. Venus Williams is a great example of that. Dominic Thiem is a great example of that when he's practicing forehands. I love the way he hits a forehand on the practice court. So go out and film yourself. And by the way, I like to hold for balance. I like to have my students hold for balance, hit the ball and hold the balance at the end. Is it realistic in that when you're playing a match, you can just hold your balance for 3 seconds? No. But is it helpful to learn balance and proper mechanics and the ability to actually have a finish that, is going up and not, you're not falling over to the left because you're completely, not able to be stable as you're striking the ball? Of course. So go out and film yourself. Let me match these videos up at the contact so you can see these, on the left and right side. But go out and film yourself. Film yourself from the back. Film yourself from the side. Look at the checkpoints, the ready position, the unit turn, the drop, the contact, the extension, and the finish. Go out and film yourself, and you work on these ideas. There's no doubt you're going to gain confidence, win more matches, and play much better tennis. This is Ryan Reedy from 2minutetennis.net. You got this.